Okay, today is Sunday, April 23rd, 2017. My name is Sue Verhoff, and I am Director of Oral History and Genealogy at the Atlanta History Center. With us today is Pete Mecca, the commander of the World War II Roundtable in Atlanta, and Bill LeCount, who is also with the World War II Roundtable. And we are so honored to have with us today Colonel Richard E. Cole, who has graciously agreed to be interviewed for the 5 millionth time about his experiences as part of Doolittle's raid. Colonel Cole, thank you so much for coming here today and taking the time to do this. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. Can we start by having you tell us your full name and your date of birth?
My full name is Richard E. Dick Cole.
Right. And where and when were you born?
I was born in Dayton, Ohio, September 7th, 1915.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Tell us a little bit about your growing up years.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be born in a what I call a good family arrangement. I was number 5 in the lineup of the children. Growing up in grade school and high school, it was what I call a happy environment, and for some reason, considered myself a happy child.
And what got you interested in aviation? Because you were interested long before the war.
Well, when I was old enough to ride around the neighborhood on my bicycle, and I got a little more adventurous when I was maybe 10 or so. There was a Army Air Force Tex airport in Dayton, and it was outside the city limits, but it didn't last long that way. I could ride my bicycle over to that place and sit on the river levee and watch what was going on in the airfield. And without realizing who was performing on any particular day, well, it was pretty interesting. They also held a annual air show in October, I think it was, that you could go to. Anyway, I had made up my mind that I was either going to be an Army Air Corps pilot or a forest ranger. And so I tried to map out how to get there. I was afraid later on I realized that my plan to be an aviator wasn't much of a plan. The main reason I wanted to be an Army aviator was that once a month the right field would send a Curtiss Hawk hovering over the armor truck from the house to the bank to the base. It was payday, and I wanted to go after the bad guys.
So how did you get into what made you decide to join the military?
Well, I went to high school, and in between this time, they had closed one of the medium schools, and they made a technical switch, and they started an aviation course. And I was supposed to graduate on 13 or 33, but they also gave those that were interested a chance to drop out of high school and go on this other course, which there were quite a few of us did. And one of the main objects was it was pointed more toward aircraft mechanics. So our course was to tear apart a Liberty engine, and there were 9 of us, and put it back together and see if it was done correctly. The teacher rigged up a system that you could turn the crankshaft on the front of by the propeller, and had little wires running to it. And you could tell whether the ignition system was put together right or not. They didn't start it. They didn't have a way of starting it, but they had a test basis. And after that, I spent quite a bit of time looking for a job after I graduated. A lot of people don't realize that you couldn't find a job. But I finally found a job at working on a farm, it was worthwhile. It was $75 a month in room and board. Anyway, I did that for a couple of years and decided I should go to college. So I started, well, first I went to the right field and applied for training in the Army. I passed all the tests, and at the end of it, I was turned down for a couple of reasons, I guess. At that time, the Air Corps was under the Signal Corps, and they didn't want to take aboard anybody that was going to have medical. So I had these 2 broken teeth and a set of tonsils. So I thought, well, I guess I better go to college and learn all about Smokey the Bear. I heard I started the college, and then between my junior or sophomore and junior year, I heard about this program called well, anyway, it was a program that was started by Uncle Sam that he would pay for you to get a private license if you qualified and did so, you had to make yourself available if there was any kind of emergency. So I went. I did that. I ended up working in summertime at different jobs, but and then I went to back up a minute. I ended up with a private license in about September of 41.
Colonel, do you remember what kind of airplane you trained on?
Mm-hmm.
You remember what kind of airplane you trained on?
Yes.
What kind was it?
It was tailorcraft side by side. Anyway, it ended up graduated from that and told to wait. Well, that was in early September, I guess. In November, I got tired of waiting and went down to Fort Thomas and enlisted.
How did your family feel about you enlisting?
Oh, they were glad to get rid of me. I know. Anyway, there was no objection. And I went to Fort Thomas, enlisted, and in about a month, I got orders to go to St. Louis at Parks Air College. And so I went and was lucky enough to go through that program, and ended up at Randolph Air Force Base, Air Corps Base, and after that to Kelly. When graduation time came, there were quite a few of us were sent to Pendleton, Oregon, the 17th Bomb Group. And so we did that, and with the training here and there, we ended up in a pretty fair bomb group.
So how did you find out about the volunteering for this secret mission? How did that come about for you?
When we went to Pendleton, there were quite a few of us, but we were all co-pilots. And I was crewed up with a gentleman that had quite a bit of time in the B-25. And that's how we were kind of welded into a squadron, and we were assigned to Pendleton, Oregon. Well, when we arrived at Pendleton, the group was already had made a temporary move up to Spokane, Washington. And we spent the summer there, and then we got orders to move to Columbia, South Carolina, for training with the Army, Air Corps, and ground forces. We spent the summer there, and on December the 5th, we were at March Field on our way back to Pendleton. And next morning, on the 7th, well, of course, the war was declared, and so we went back to Pendleton and changed some of the bomb racks and put in some that handle submarine bombing. And we went on sub-patrol in Washington and Oregon, all along the coast. And we did that until February. And we got orders to move to Columbia. We did that. We got to Columbia, and it was a new base, and it wasn't finished yet. It was, had a set of cross runways, but everything else was mud and water at that time. We were living in tents. And each squadron had a information board that you're supposed to read once a day. And I read on that particular day, read about it, and the instructor that I had at the time was a good guy and a good pilot. And he had put his name on the list. So I thought that was a pretty good idea. Even if I didn't think so after I did it. Anyway, the people that elected to go, I don't know how they picked them or what. We started training the way they wanted us to train for the mission. Well, during all the training, I had just one instructor, and we were in about third or fourth hour up to that training, and he became ill. So that left us without a pilot. And knowing that there were 8 extra crews waiting in the wings, we all decided that we still wanted to go. And I went to the ops officer and told him, and he said, well, the old man's coming in this afternoon. see what we can do. This all happened in about an hour. Colonel Doolittle did come in to take charge of the group, and I don't know what happened to his. He had a gentleman that was going to be his. I don't know what it was, but anyway, it ended up that all he did was take the seat of the gentleman that was ill, and we were the baggage that went along with it. and that's it.
Colonel, did you know that Jimmy Doolittle was in charge before he showed up?
Yes, we knew that, but he had not been there. And I had the advantage of knowing who he was before some of the other guys, because I saw him at a distance at McCook Field. Yeah.
What do you remember about the training that you did there at Eglin Field? Anything stand out in particular?
Remember about what?
The training at Eglin Field.
Oh.
Anything stand out in particular about that time?
Well, Colonel Doolittle wanted to try and have all the members get about 50 hours training time. But when he received command of the group, the military people had already decided that the lunch time for the group was going to be on the 19th of April. Yeah. And they gave him 90 days to complete all the training. But we ended up about 30 hours. Yeah. It turned out that time was enough to do what we needed to do, and we did it, and it was okay.
But what do you remember about the trip to the Hornet, about arriving there and seeing those? Did you see them lift the B-25s onto the deck?
Yeah.
What was that like?
About the one. I lost you there.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was it like to watch them lift the B-25s onto the Hornet with those cranes? Were you there when they did that in San Francisco?
Yeah. Well, and you know, the Navy's got quite a bit of big, heavy things. And all they did was make sure that everything was hooked up and lifted it up and up on the deck. Yeah.
What do you remember about the crossing on the ship?
I don't know.
Had you been on a ship before? Were you seasick
No,
during the crossing?
no. I had never seen the ocean either. But when we landed at Alameda, Colonel Doolittle got out of the airplane and went to some headquarters building talking to, I guess it was one of the admirals. And then I taxied it down the small street where we could hook it up and carry it up.
When did you find out that you were going to be on a carrier? Did you know that before you got to San Francisco?
Well, it was pretty obvious to us that we were going to take off of a carrier. But not thinking about Japan, our thoughts were directed towards some island that we would take off the carrier and land on the island and start fighting the war, because you had, if everything went right, you had a squadron commander and 16 airplanes and enough people to go with it. So that part of it was a surprise. We set sail on the 2nd of April, and 2 days out to sea, we were told we were going to go over to Japan. There's a lot of jubilation and jumping up and down and so forth. But after a while, everything got quiet. And it was also fairly obvious what that was. As far as I know, nobody jumped ship or backed out. And if they did, Colonel Doolittle gave permission on several occasions. If you feel you don't want to go, why, you could do it without any repercussions.
So can you take us through the day when you launched? You didn't launch when you were supposed to. It was a day early. Can you tell us about what that was like when you got the word it was time to go now?
Well, by that time we had gotten a pretty good chunk out of our training, and it didn't pose any great problem. We were able to continue the navigation part of it, and the classroom instruction on it, and with everything considered, I think we had enough training.
Can you tell me what it was like to launch off the deck? That must have been a scary moment. What was it like?
Well, surprisingly enough, with the training, that became old hat. And the only unknown things that would cause much thought was what kind of weather conditions you were going to have. And it turned out that was pretty easy, yeah. And also, everybody thought that the takeoff was going to be the most challenging time. To make it so it would help out is that we centered a B-25 over the center line of the deck, and that left about 6 feet on each side of the wingtip. And then we painted a white line from the left gear all the way from where we would be parked down to the end of the car. And also one for the nose wheel all the way down. So all you had to do is steer the thing, and that worked out fine. So we didn't really consider a big problem with it. As a matter of fact, Colonel Doolittle wrote in his I guess you call it his checklist book. A night takeoff could have been possible. But when he broached it to the Navy couldn't buy it because they were afraid that one of the airplanes would drift over and hit the island. And at that time, we didn't have we only had 4 carriers, and we couldn't afford it carrier-wise.
So once you took off, you had a few hours before you got to Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
What was the mood on the plane?
Well, the mood was, it didn't really get keyed up or anything, or it didn't get back down. It stayed pretty even. And I think the reason for that was that we didn't have any interceptions from the carrier into Japan. When we got to Japan, it was like flying into Miami Beach. People were playing at the beach, or working on the boats, and all kinds of. And it didn't make it a mistake or anything. So we just went ahead.
Okay, I'm going to pause this for just a minute. No problems at all, and you were coming in very low.
Yeah.
So you could see everything, right? Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about your flight to China. Once you dropped your payload.
Okay.
The plan, I guess, was to land and refuel, but that didn't work, did it?
No, we could have used more fuel, but it wouldn't have done anything very real. Well, you might say that it wouldn't have done any good, except cause us to run the engines more, because when we landed there, arrived over China, it was socked in completely and we had no idea where we were, except that we were over China somewhere. So it didn't I don't know whether anybody thought about that or not, but we didn't think about it.
So the order came to bail out. Tell us what that was like.
Well, after a flight of the whole flight was 13 hours, and loosely we figured 4 hours to Japan and the other 9 hours over China Sea into China. And we didn't have any particular dramatic things happen on that trip, except the fact that we ended up taking time for a gun shell for both, for all of us, and to be thinking about what was ahead next. Anyway, we were cruising along, and Hank Potter, the navigator, handed me a note that said we were going to end up about 180 miles short of China. And we didn't know what to think about that, except when we arrived at that point, we still had fuel. And figured that maybe the warm front was giving us a tailwind, because it was something that the ship was doing. We were flying about 200 feet, and it turned out that we figured we flew the whole flight except the time for the bailout, and there was something else. But the rest of it was all been approved. So what happened was team member had set up a homing station, portable homing station. Well, the airplane carrying that home portable thing crashed on the way there, and killed everybody on board, and they lost all our reverence charts. We tried to contact them by radio, and I didn't think about it much at the time, but when we took off, and the Navy held up a heads-up board that what our course would be to China. We made a circle, and I looked down at the carrier and thought, well, we've just celebrated, just had separated ourselves from civilization. And the reason I thought that way is that in our, I guess, your zeal to make the airplane as light as possible and replace it with fuel, we took out all the long-range radio equipment. And the only communication we had with the outside world was the command set. It had a range of about 45 miles. And had there been some kind of an emergency, you'd have had 16 B-25 floating around in the Pacific.
Have you trained to bail out of the aircraft? Have you ever used a parachute before?
Or since.
Okay, sir, what was your first impression flying a B-25? What did you think of the B-25?
Mm-hmm.
How'd you like the B-25?
Well, the only thing I can tell you about that was that all through my training I had a Model A Ford. And going from the Model A Ford to a B-25 was like going with a Mustang.
Okay, that was a good aircraft, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And how low did you fly into Japan? How far off the water?
We figured about 200 feet.
200 feet, okay. What was your target?
Our target was northwest Tokyo.
Okay, was it a plant or what was it?
The whole area, because we had incendiary bombs.
Okay.
Yeah. And another reason for that is that we wanted to light up Tokyo as much as we could, but we also needed to set up a reference point for the airplanes that were following us, so they could go on down. Of course, two sets of airplanes went to Kobe and Nagoya.
Did you experience any flak or see any Japanese fighters?
No fighters. Coming off the bombing run, we did have flak, but it wasn't
Didn't get close to you?
no, yeah.
Okay.
Bumped us around.
Okay. And when you bailed out, from what I read, you landed in a tree.
Mm-hmm.
And did you stay in that tree all night because you didn't know how
Well,
far?
it was the best landing in that situation. It was very mountainous, and I think I was pretty lucky. Yeah. Although I found out that they don't give the person a heart for self-inflicted.
Yeah, that's true. And Colonel Doolittle landed in a pile of manure.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And your entire crew made it back. Is that right? Your
Yeah.
entire crew. Your whole crew made it back?
Yeah.
All right, very good, sir. And you ended up flying in Burma.
Yeah.
Right? My father flew in Burma also.
Yeah, out of the whole crew, I was the only one that wanted to go back a little bit. They were told if we survived the mission, we'd get to come home. Because they had all these bond tour things set up, and well, there's 26 of us didn't get to come home. What they planned on doing with us, we didn't know. But our salvation was that in between they were thinking about setting up the link between India and China, and the squadron commander didn't have that. Well, one time we had 4 airplanes and 35 pilots. So when they were recruiting for the hump, there were 6 of us that decided to do that. And we got checked out in the C-47 and did that for 14 months.
And the C-47s are still flying.
That's right. Yeah.
Great area.
Yeah.
Colonel, we are just about out of time.
Yeah.
We could sit here and listen to you for the next 3 weeks without a problem. This has been such an honor, and I want to thank you for your service. Thank you for all that you've done. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we stop?
Yeah, I just think about it. Personally, It was not a highly dangerous affair. You could do something about it if there was a problem, but I thought we all were pretty lucky.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are. Well, thank you. Thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome.